Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name's Jackie and I'm an aspiring fiction author who does videos on writing and writing experiments. And today, or tomorrow, I am going to attempt to do a 24-hour dopamine detox. Now this is an idea I got from another YouTuber called Andrew Kirby who does amazing videos on personal development and productivity style topics. And he recently released a series on dopamine detoxes. And he positioned it to people who are constantly consuming more and more personal development content but are never taking action on it. And the problem with this is when you say you're going to do something like starting a new routine or going after a new goal and then you don't, you gradually lose credibility with yourself and you gradually stop respecting yourself and you start feeling bad about yourself. And when you're feeling bad about yourself, what you naturally want to do is look for things that will make you feel good. And what makes us feel good is a dopamine rush. And luckily, or not so luckily for us, there are many things available to give us that rush at this time in history. Things like social media, Netflix, junk food, porn, and so on. These are all things that give us instant gratification for very little effort on our part. The problem with this though is that once you start seeking that dopamine hit, it can become addictive and you keep looking for your next fix, which means it's very easy to go into a spiral of watching video after video rather than actually producing something of value or bettering yourself. Now, one of the challenges with the way society is set up today is that it's very hard to get out of this cycle. And the reason is because we have so many options, so you aren't making any single choice in isolation. So the example Andrew gives is you're not just choosing to eat a carrot or choosing not to eat a carrot, you're choosing between a carrot and chocolate. And most of the time, your brain is going to want to have chocolate because it gets the instant rush from the sugar and the fat. Similarly, as a writer, you're not choosing to sit down and write, you're just choosing to watch a video on YouTube instead. And ultimately, when we're given the choice, our brain will choose the path of least resistance. It will choose the easiest path to instant gratification, which means it's going to go for Netflix or social media or video games rather than sitting down and doing the work and creating something. And one of the issues that compounds this is the fact that so many of these technologies that we use today actually play into that need of our brains. So every time you post something on Facebook and you get a like, or every time you like something on Facebook and see the number go up, that gives you another little hit and that tricks you into staying on the platform for longer. So it's very easy to get stuck. So when it comes to the dopamine detox, for a 24-hour period, what you're doing is cutting out everything that could stimulate a dopamine rush so you can focus on the more important things instead. So that means no TV, no computer, no video games, no phone, and instead you're stuck with things like journaling and walking and exercise and meditation. And although 24 hours isn't a long enough period to reconfigure your brain chemistry, it is an important period on a psychological level because if you commit to doing this and you do it, that is really powerful evidence to you and your brain that yes, you can uphold your commitments, and no, you don't need to be dependent on these things that you've been using to get through your day or to avoid the things you know you should be working on. So the reason I thought it would be helpful for me to try this is because it's been almost 2 weeks since I last did any work on my book for various personal and professional reasons, and I thought it would be good to use this as a reset, just to take a day away from all of the stimuli that are far easier and far more, not more gratifying, but more instantly gratifying than working on my book is, which honestly is hard work. It doesn't go well a lot of the time, and sometimes it's easier to watch a video or read a book rather than work on my own book. So what are the rules? Well, there are 3 different levels that Andrew has outlined: beginner, intermediate, and time theorist. And depending on which level you choose, that will influence what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So for the beginner level, you are not allowed your phone, computer, any gaming, any porn, drugs, or stimulating food. You are still allowed to have coffee and tea. You're allowed to talk to people, you're allowed to read books, listen to music, eat food, you're allowed to journal, you're allowed to walk, and you're allowed to exercise. When you get to the intermediate level, you then lose coffee and tea, talking with people, reading books and music. And this is the level I'm planning to attempt tomorrow. And the things I'm most worried about are, I'm a little worried about not using my computer. And when you think about the reason why you're not allowed to use these things, it's because you don't want them to stimulate that dopamine rush. You don't want them to give you that instant little high. And the reason I think computers are banned is because that's where you can access a lot of websites and social networks and so on that do give you that high. And the only reason I would really want to use my computer in this is to use Microsoft Word so I can type my book. So technically, I probably could do it for that because writing, I think, would sit in the same category as journaling. It is producing stuff. You are reflecting on your work. You're not looking for gratification or reward, which requires no effort on your part. However, I'm going to be good and I will write by hand tomorrow. The next thing is no talking to people. So I'm doing this on a Sunday, which makes things easier because I don't need to talk to anyone at work. However, I am married, and that means I'll basically be ignoring my husband for a day. He has told me he is fine with this though, so read into that what you will. And then the final thing I'm a little worried about is no reading. So I'm okay not having the internet for a day, not having Netflix, not having my phone, not having my computer. But reading's my go-to source of entertainment, and I'm not actually sure how I'm going to fill the whole day if I can't even read. And then that brings me to an interesting observation I've had already, which is that my brain is already trying to figure out how I'll organize tomorrow and what I'll do. So I'm thinking, I'll probably go on 3 different walks. I'll probably do some exercise and stretching at home. I'll be writing my book by hand. Maybe I'll do some plotting work. Maybe I'll clean the house. And in fact, I realized I was doing this when yesterday I thought, oh, I should give the house a vacuum. And then I'm like, no, save it for Sunday because that's something that's not on my not allowed to do list on Sunday. So the fact that my brain's already trying to think of ways to get around potentially being bored, I think is a sign of how dependent we get when it comes to all of this external stimulation. But the ultimate goal is to use this to give my brain a little bit of quiet time, use it as a bit of reset, and to get back into my book. And I'm hoping that by enforcing a level of quietness around me, that'll give my brain some space to really get back into the book and start building writing momentum again. So from here, I'm going to enjoy the rest of the day when I am allowed to talk to my husband and watch YouTube and read and do all of the things that are banned for tomorrow. And then I will check back in tomorrow with how I'm going. It is now Monday and I've successfully completed my 24-hour dopamine detox. So from 9:30 p.m. on Saturday night until about 7 a.m. this morning, I did not use my phone, my computer, watch porn, play video games, do drugs, eat stimulating food, drink coffee or tea, talk to anyone, read, or listen to music. I did have one slip up, which was a moment with my husband, and it was an I told you so moment. And I just spoke without even realizing, and he got to gleefully say to me, you're talking. So the moral of that story is, if you want me to break a vow of silence, all you need to do is give me the opportunity to be right, and silence will be thrown out the window. There were a couple of things that stood out to me about the experience. The first one was that I had so much time, and I've never been the sort of person to complain about not having enough time before. I've always recognized that if I don't have the time to do something, I'm usually not prioritizing it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So for the past couple of weeks, I haven't really worked on my book. That's not because I didn't have enough time. because I could have put time towards that if I wanted to, but there was something else happening in my life and I chose to make that a higher priority, and consequently that was taking up a lot of the available book writing time and energy. What was interesting is that I never consciously realized how much time I was spending on these instant gratification activities and how much that was making me feel a sense of urgency when it came to getting things done, because there was always something else to do. Whereas yesterday, there was nothing else to do because I couldn't do anything. So I went for my walk in the morning and I stopped at a park in Kalamaya on the way back, and I just sat there and watched the world go by for 10-15 minutes, which I've never really done before because there's been this rush to, okay, let's get home, finish the walk because I need to do X, Y, and Z. And that happened several times throughout the day where I would do one thing and then sit down and go, oh, well, I guess I'll just sit here and stare into space for 5 minutes because there's nothing else to rush to. However, having so much time made me realize how dependent I was on these activities. And while I was fine when I was doing something, so I was fine to go walking without listening to anything, I was fine to clean the house without any music on, I didn't need to distract myself because I was actively doing something. But as soon as I stopped, I immediately wanted to go to my computer and open up YouTube, or I wanted to pick up my Kindle. I couldn't just stop and be quiet on my own. And anytime I was still for more than a couple of minutes, my mind immediately started looking for, oh, well, what else can I do now? The good news is that the apartment's probably the cleanest it's been since we moved in. So how did I spend my day? Well, I went on 2 separate walks, which were each about an hour and a half, so that's 3 hours of walking. I did about an hour of writing, half an hour of journaling, maybe 2 hours of cleaning. I wasn't tracking the time, so these were all approximate. I lay down in bed with my eyes closed and just daydreamed for a good 2 hours because I had nothing else to do. And then, of course, there was probably an hour and a half, 2 hours of eating, showering, and all of that stuff. Oh, and I did half an hour of stretching as well. So it's not like I did nothing with the day. I still had quite a bit on, but there was still so much time. Now, arguably, I should have been spending all of that time working on my book, but I did struggle a bit, and I think there were 2 sides to this. One was that I couldn't use my computer, so I didn't have the reference of anything else I'd already done to use as a springboard. And then the other one was that I couldn't use my computer, so I couldn't type. So I was writing by hand, which surprisingly went fairly well. I didn't get cramps or anything, though I wasn't doing it for that long. But writing by hand just goes so much slower than typing. When I'm typing and I'm in the flow, I feel like there's no gap between my brain and my fingers, like the thoughts just come out and appear on the screen. Whereas when I was writing, it was so agonizingly slow, and I found that I was skipping through things rather than going into the same amount of detail I would have done if I was typing on my computer. So I think that if I'd had access to my computer and Microsoft Word, I probably would have spent more of the day writing, just because the act of writing would have been easier. Having said that, the other side of the argument is, does every hour need to be spent productively? Do you always need to be producing something? Shouldn't you be able to sit down and take a break? And I think that was where my greatest weakness was in this experiment, because I really couldn't sit down and take a break. I did lie down with my eyes closed, and once I was in bed with my eyes closed, even though it was, let's say, 2-3 p.m., I was able to treat it almost as like the time when you go to bed before you fall to sleep and you're just letting your mind wander. And I think just being in bed and not having my eyes open and not having any stimulus helped with that. But when I wasn't in bed, it was really hard for me to switch off, to the extent where I probably did a lot more than you're supposed to on one of these detoxes. And I actually feel quite tired today as a result. In fact, this morning I actually spent 2 hours reading and on YouTube because I felt like I needed to take that time to unwind from yesterday, even though theoretically I should have felt refreshed after yesterday. So I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm aware that it's pretty appalling that my brain has gotten to this stage where I need YouTube or a book or some sort of stimulus to switch off. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't done this experiment. So all in all, was it a valuable experiment? I think yes, because even though I've never considered myself to be a person who's particularly plugged in, I'm not that active on social media. Most of the platforms I'm on, I only joined because I used to have a business and I was using them for marketing. But I still have that instinct to look outside myself to give my brain something to feast on. And that's probably not a good thing. I shouldn't be freaking out at the idea of having 6 hours left until I go to bed and I've got nothing to do and I better grab my phone or turn to the computer. Having said that, I think going completely cold turkey was a bit much, or at least it would be a bit much for more than a day for me. So although I see the value in taking this time to detox, and I see the value so much that I do want to create like a weekly detox day, I am going to step back to the beginner level, which means I still will be able to talk and listen to music and read. And I'm also going to make the small modification, which is I can use my computer but for productive work. So what that means is it will be on airplane mode. I will not be able to access the internet or any of the goodies it contains, but I will be able to access Microsoft Word and Camtasia. So that means I can write and I can edit videos. Both of these are things that I'm creating or producing rather than me consuming other people's content. And I think video editing, at least, that's actually one of those tasks that does allow my mind to unwind a little bit. From a writing perspective, was it valuable? Well, I don't think yesterday I achieved very much. I wrote just under 1,000 words by hand, I think. So that's more than I'd done in basically the previous 2 weeks. And it was good to get started again. I also started thinking about how to integrate a new thread of the plot that I came up with in the second half of April. So I did a lot of thinking about the book. I did a little bit of writing, and having that as one of the only activities I could do for the day meant like I had to write, otherwise I would be bored. So it was good in that sense. However, I think that not having the computer and not being able to type did make it more difficult to use the opportunity as well as I could have. I also don't know if having the mental space increased my creativity and productivity, which is something I was expecting. I thought I would be able to write for much longer and I'd come up with a lot more, and that didn't happen. However, it was a one-day experiment. My brain hasn't actually changed as a result, so I'm not expecting significant changes to my performance or mental well-being. Having said all of that, I do think there's merit in doing this for the long term. I think there's merit in taking time away from our devices and all of these things that trigger short-term behaviors and seeking out our latest fix of entertainment. So that's why I do want to continue doing the beginner's version of this on a weekly basis. And I hope that as a result of giving my brain more space over time, my writing will become more effective over time. That is all from me for this video, and now over to you. Have you tried the 24-hour dopamine detox? And if so, please let me know how you went in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye.